Okay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Don Fitz. I'm the outreach coordinator for the Green Party of St. Louis. I want to welcome everybody to the program, the webinar this evening on It's More Than Gun Violence. And the Green Party of St. Louis has been having programs for over 25 years, most recently at Legacy. But when COVID hit and we started using Zooms, we realized we could co-sponsor with the Green Party of Kansas City. And once we co-sponsored with people across Missouri, we thought, well, we can co-sponsor with people all across the country. And actually, we've had several international participants. This evening, when we talk about It's More Than Gun Violence, our moderator is going to be Ajamu Baraka, who was the vice presidential candidate in 2016, and is also very involved in the Black is Back Coalition and the Black Alliance for Peace. Okay, and Ajamu is going to be our moderator, so I will turn it over to Ajamu.
Thank you so much, Don. It's good to be here this evening, and I'm honored to moderate this very important conversation. It's good to see the collection of folks that we have here. Many of our friends, of course, we have folks from, as Don referenced, the Black is Back Coalition, in which the Black Alliance for Peace is a proud member of. We got the Uhuru Movement folks up in here. We got our leader, Brother Zaki Baruti, in the house. And of course, we have our dear brother and leader, Brother Chairman Omali Yashitilla. So we should have a very interesting conversation tonight, a very important one. The topic, of course, as Don referenced, is to look at this issue of gun violence, and to maybe begin to deconstruct what this really means. What do we mean by gun violence? You know, we have a situation where we are sitting, most of the folks on this call, at the center of what many people refer to as the most violent empire, the most criminal society ever produced by human beings, in which the violence is very center of its creation. And we know that
it's about gun violence.
And we're going to ask everybody who's not muted to do that, okay? Besides whoever is talking at this point, which should just be me. So we're going to look at what this violence phenomenon really means. Again, we understand that it can't just be related to the notion of access to weapons, since we know that settler colonial projects have always had at its core the issue of violence. That's how they are established, that's how they're maintained. And when you have a settler colonial project like this United States of America, that then is transforms itself into an empire, then we have to look at all of the various elements that provides a rationalization for that, a cultural platform for people supporting the various expressions and the manifestations of violence, from the entertainment industry to the school system, to the religion. Every aspect of the culture and society has to be taken a look at if we're really serious. Okay, so we're going to get right into this conversation and look at the various constitutional issues and other issues related to this. My understanding is each one of our speakers will have 10 minutes. At the end of the presentations of the speakers, we would have a period of Q&A. We're going to come back and remind people that when we have the Q&A, we want people to limit their commentary to the extent possible to no more than 2 minutes. We like to have questions as opposed to long dissertations. And when they're saying that to suppress conversation, we want that. But let's make sure that we are mindful of the time. So it's my pleasure to be here. I'm going to, of course, to jump right into the program, and we're going to introduce our first speaker, a representative of the Green Party. Again, I want to raise up the outstanding work of the Green Party, both locally there in Missouri, but across the country, and some of the particular kinds of internal struggles now that have to be waged around this issue of violence and what it means. So we have Frank Lawrence, who's with the Green Party of Missouri, who would talk about the Second Amendment and how that amendment impacts and affects federal, state, and local government as it relates to gun safety regulations and other components. So Frank, you have the floor.
There I am. Thank you. My name is Frank Lawrence. And first slide, sir, is that I'm a farm boy from the center of Minnesota. So I grew up on a large farm with 80 acres of hardwood forest, and we had a lake and a large duck swamp. And I spent most of my childhood hiking, camping, fishing, hunting. Started to hunt with my father and uncles about age 10 to 12. And I have a gun collection. You can flip a slide there, sir. There you go, thanks. And so I have a gun collection, and I still love to trap and target shooting when I can get out. Slide. And here's a nice display of my gun collection. Of course, as a responsible gun owner, my guns and ammunition are safely locked away in a steel cabinet because I have grandchildren running around this house. And I'm a liberal progressive socialist that wants common sense gun safety laws that are uniform throughout the country. And we should be able to do that politically. It's a political decision not to do that. And I'll just say a few optional things here before I really get started. Is that some people should never be able to buy, sell, or use guns. Your right to bear arms does not trump my right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The more guns we have, we will increase our accident, suicide, and homicide rates. Gun safety regulations are necessary to reduce the problems with guns. And in the 12 years between 2009 and 2020, 13,063 people were shot and killed in the United States in mass shootings, and 947 more were shot and wounded. So we're going to talk a little bit about crime statistics along those lines of how prevalent they are in this country. Next slide, please. So if I was to, and 10 years ago after Sandy Hook, I made a resolution that would be one of my common topics on Facebook. And I've spent so much time in Facebook jail because of this. But I patterned my comments and my set of regulations after the way we drive cars, trucks, motorcycles, planes, bass boats, anything that has a fairly high risk that needs to be regulated so that all guns are registered. All gun owners and operators are trained in gun safety. All gun operators have to pass the requirements of licensure, and a centralized database is used to perform background checks on all guns that are sold or transferred. Next slide, please. And unfortunately, our databases were always set up with lots of holes and problems. We're able to do it with other things, but we can't seem to register guns and keep track of licenses on that way. Sandy Hook, this is the 10th memorial anniversary of the Sandy Hook, which was memorable to a lot of people. And you would be excused if this was all running together for you, because we seem to be having about 1 or 2 of these a day. Back then, we had a local nut come in with assault weapons and other handguns and wiped out 20 children between the ages of 6 and 7, and 6 of their staff members. And then he had already killed his mother, and then he shot himself in the head. So it was really, really a grotesque situation, and it's been one of the record-setting ones. And for 10 years, a lot of people have been pursuing various forms of attacking this problem. So we've got to do something more than thoughts and prayers. And so they did sue the manufacturer of the assault rifle, because they had been selling this thing as to civilians when it was really intended to be a military weapon. And they're really building up the fact that the civilians should own one just like it. And eventually they settled for 73 million to the families. The other one of interest is that Alex Jones, our friendly conspiracy theorist, right-wing news nut, had come up with the theory that these were all actors and this whole thing was faked, and that we were just trying to attack the Second Amendment, and none of that was true. And eventually, fairly recently, October of 2022, after all this time, he was ordered to pay 965 million in damages to the families of the Sandy Hook victims, but it doesn't bring anybody back. And so for some reason, an interesting thing occurred during the COVID epidemic. Was that for some reason, I guess they thought maybe guns would be effective against the virus or something. I don't know what they were thinking, but we had record sales of guns during that period of tumult where we had a pandemic going on, and we've really broken all records in this country. But the final thing I want to leave you with is that there were in this country right now, and this is just a bare estimate, that we've got 393 million privately owned firearms in the United States. And that means that we have about 120 guns for every 100 Americans. And the crux of the problem is, how do you control something where your country is super saturated with weapons? And we've actually removed the controls. Next slide, please. The next slide, I should be about the Second Amendment. So I'll read it to you. The well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, in countless conversations I've had with gun trolls, they would say, what part about being infringed don't you understand? So if this was an English writing lesson, they would have received a failing grade for this one. There's two completely different thoughts separated by a comma, and nothing is well explained and leaves everything open to interpretation. And so it's been whitewashed and interpreted incorrectly for many years. But I would like to mention that there's only 3 of these in all of the constitutions around the world. Mexico, Guatemala, and the United States are the only ones that have this kind of a statement in their constitution. And so many of our leaders have suggested that we either edit it or delete it completely. Obviously,
3 more minutes.
thank you.
Uh-huh.
So who wrote this thing? And it was written by James Madison, who was one of the leading slave owners of the state of Virginia. And basically, the militia that he's talking about were slave patrols and slave catchers that they employed to intimidate the slaves, catch the escapees, and prevent rebellions. And so the primary tyranny that they feared was somebody was going to free their slaves. And it's believed that, the next slide, modern policing probably grew out of many of these features. And I have a little bit here more about the slave control, but I think I'll flip on to the next thing, because I have a feeling that some of you will be talking about similar topics. I want to briefly talk about, should see a comparison of conservative versus liberal mindsets. So what I was contending with when I was talking to people was our conservatives maintain the status quo, and where other more left wing tend to be open to changes, improvements, and reforms. And then there's several other things. Of course, it's much more complicated than that. Next slide. But one of the things that you have to mention is that guns, both nationally and internationally, the United States is one of the leading dealers of weapons and ammunition around the world. We have about a 40% market share of the international sales. Next slide. And the gun sales in Missouri are going nice and strong, but one of our problems is they cook the books and they underreport things. And we don't really know how many guns are actually being sold in Missouri very well. It's probably a trafficking state. So if you're from Illinois or Minnesota or someplace that has better laws, you probably come to Missouri to buy your guns here. And next slide. Should be a current status of our gun safety legislation. So we were rated the 9th highest rate of gun deaths, and we're among the 10 states with the highest gun homicide rates and the 11th highest rate of household firearm ownership. And we have virtually none of the foundational gun violence prevention laws in place and operational in the state of Missouri. We recently repealed one of the main ones. And really, we have very few. And I had gone into some detail on following slides. I'll just flip through with some of these slides here and show you.
Frank,
That,
I'm sorry, but your time has ended.
okay, all right. Anyway, if you,
Sorry.
all right.
Thank you so much, Frank. And perhaps you get a chance in the Q&A to touch on whatever points you may have missed during.
Yeah, there's
your
some good
presentation.
information in the handout of the PowerPoint. So
Fantastic, fantastic. Our next speaker will be Michelle Smith. Michelle is active with the Missourians against the death penalty. She believes that a culture of death permeates the history of that state, history that is characterized by racial terror, lynchings, and the modern day application of the death penalty. So Michelle, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. First, before I get started speaking, I just wanted to give my appreciation and recognition for the elders on this call that are local to where I live. Of course, Chairman O'Malley, Kalimu, and Zaki. Not only have they done a lot of work nationally, locally here in St. Louis, they are people that I look up to and respect in this movement. So definitely wanted to give them that recognition. I am Michelle Smith. I am co-director of Missourians to Abolish the Death Penalty. And in my work, we research, we study the history of what the death penalty is. And in that work, we understand that this all started with the lynchings of my ancestors. There was a time when the injustice and the terror of our people controlled, those enslaved Africans. And there was a time that, that wasn't working anymore. And so they regurgitated that system and made it into what we call the criminal punishment system. And now they have something called the death penalty, which is still another form of control of not only, the descendants of enslaved Africans, but as well poor people of all colors and backgrounds in this nation. So specifically in Missouri, we do work under a program called Community Remembrance Project. And that is a project of EJI, which is the Equal Justice Initiative down in Montgomery, Alabama. And in the work of the CRP, Community Remembrance, what we do is we honor the victims of the historic victims of racial terror lynchings. And in our state, we have a documented, and when I say documented, I mean it was in the newspapers. There was a time where these psychopaths who lynched our people, they enjoyed it. It was an form of entertainment for them. So they put it in the papers. Lynchings were spectacles. In our state, there are 61 documented lynchings where it was in a paper, it was a broadcast, and they did make those into events where they took families and such. And of course, there are more than 61 people that have been lynched in Missouri. However, those are the documented lynchings that we found proof of. And in the work of recognizing those victims, we do several things. First thing we do is called a soil collection ceremony. And we go to the spots that's closest to where the people were lynched. And we collect the soil and have basically a ceremony. I know this last year, Mama Jamala Rogers came and did a libation ceremony for the man who was lynched in downtown St. Louis. So all over the state, we do these ceremonies because we need to recognize, we need to, speak these people and the situation that happened to them, and we don't need to forget it. Currently, I believe we have done that particular ceremony for 6 people of the 61, and our work continues. And with that particular work about honoring and recognizing historic victims of racial terror lynchings, it draws a direct line to what we do with the death penalty. And that's one reason why we do that particular work, because it's very much, from one end of a line to the next is just parallel. And so what we understand is that when we look at places in our state that had the highest number of people that were who were victims of racial terror lynching, and we look at the people who have been victims of modern death penalty, if you overlay those maps, they lay on top of each other. The counties in Missouri that execute the most are the counties in Missouri that executed the most people via lynching. And we also know that current death penalty is just, another word for lynching. They lay the people on a table and they shoot, chemicals in their arm, but it's still a form of racial terror lynching, regardless of if it's, if it's not hanging from a tree, right? It's not being burned, but it is still terrorizing victims of this system and executing them. So I see the parallel in that. And so that's really what our work entails. And with understanding that our modern death penalty system is a regurgitation of racial terror lynchings, it allows us, especially me, to understand why especially our elected officials are so married to the death penalty. We talk to our elected officials all the time. I actually got back from our Capitol talking to them today, and some of them don't necessarily care about this, but a lot of them have a really, really strong connection to this particular form of punishment. And, most of those people that have this strong connection to the death penalty are from those places in rural Missouri that were famous for like sundown towns and famous for running people out of town or for racial terror lynchings. So these are the people that many Missourians elect to represent them. And so they are definitely very much, deeply connected to this punishment as that ultimate quote unquote justice, which capital punishment is not justice, but that's what they believe. And so with understanding that, we have a firm understanding of why our state still kills people. We understand, it's difficult because the people that are on our death row become our friends. And, it's a very sad situation. But when I look back at people like Ernest Johnson, who 2 years ago is an intellectually disabled man who was executed in Missouri. He had the mental capacity of an 8-year-old, but they still murdered him. When I look at people like Kevin Johnson, who 2 months ago was executed by the state because he dared to defend his family and his brother, who he just saw the police neglect to the point where the little boy died. And Kevin took his rage out a little while later and killed a policeman himself. And he did regret what he did. However, it is something that happened, and this state made sure that they taught him a lesson and they executed him 2 months ago.
Michelle, this is
Yes.
3 minutes left.
Okay. And I also understand that the bloodthirst that this state has, because next Tuesday, the state is scheduled to execute a person. Not only is he not guilty, he is innocent. He has proof of his innocence. There are records, there are flight records, there are accounts of different people in the victim's family that saw her and her children. But honestly, they don't care. And, people truly don't understand that, but I understand that the goal, the point is to terrorize my people and to murder them. And they've killed innocent people before, they'll do it again. And so this is something that we deal with in Missouri, especially in Missouri. Other southern states, of course, deal with the same thing, but I think that most people don't understand how truly backwards and how truly racist and how truly traumatizing and violent the state of Missouri is, especially when it comes to our prisons and things like the death penalty. There were 2 people executed in our state last year. There's been 1 executed so far this year, and they're looking to execute 3 more people this year. And so I like to get across to people that we can't divorce what happens today from our historic understanding of why our people were lynched, why our people were terrorized, and how they were controlled, because those things are existing today just in another form, but it is still the same thing. And it's sad when when I see Black people say things like they agree with the death penalty, but they just been, indoctrinated to believe that. But the reality is, this is literally the exact same system that our enslaved ancestors dealt with. They just called it something else, and they, legalized it in a different form, but it's still the exact same racial terror lynchings, AKA the death penalty. So I'll go ahead and end with that. Thank you for giving me the time to speak.
Michelle, thank you so much for that very, very important presentation that really helps us to understand the pervasiveness of this culture of death, even though it's advanced as a state sanctioned event. It has to have public support, and that is one of the things we have to look at in terms of understanding what is at the base of the violence in U.S. society. Our next speaker will be Lisa Lagron. She's a member of the very important, long-standing organization for Black struggle. She's part of a model municipal program in St. Louis, which encourages communities to police themselves and reduce violence by training participants on how to use de-escalation tactics when intervening in confrontations. Very, very interesting program. So Lisa, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you. My name is Lisa Legron, and I am the project coordinator for Project Haki. Project Haki is a community-based violence program located in the 22nd Ward. It was created in 2020 because of a surge of shootings that was going on in the neighborhood. These shootings were so bad that within 5 days, 6 people were dead and 7 injured. So Jamala and I, we were part of the team that was out there when the shootings occurred, and we had to really control the crowd. And so we decided that we sat down and we decided that we needed to do something because, OBS been in the 22nd Ward. And so we came up with Project Haki. It is a comprehensive and coordinated approach to violence by understanding the root causes and by changing negative social norms into a transformative culture that builds healthy, empowered, and cohesive neighborhoods. And so what we do is I go out with a team of people, and we talk with the community. We build a trust. They let us know if things are going on, and if things are going on, we try to intervene. We try to do some intervention. And if that don't help, we got to go do some de-escalation. And so that's what me and the team does. The team job is to identify, interrupt, and de-escalate potentially violent situations. We try to prevent retaliations and mediate ongoing conflicts. We make need assessments of contacts, collect, enter, and analyze data. I track shoot. We do outreach activities and we incorporate into planning. Our goal is to get the community to participate in problem solving and changing destructive behavior in our own communities without the police. Because what I have witnessed is that sometimes when the police is called, they make the situation worse. That's what we do. I just left Washington, D.C. back in December and I spoke at the White House, and we talked about the situation. I talked heavily about the situation in the city of St. Louis. I realized that that Amendment 2, the right to bear arms, I'm not against that, but some of these laws was not meant for the city of St. Louis. Because the people in the city of St. Louis are not hunting deers and animals, they are hunting each other. Right now, to me, St. Louis is in a state of emergency. We got a lot of shootings going on. And we got a lot of carjackings. We just got a lot of things going on. And so I think some of these laws need to be changed, these gun laws. These children are carrying guns and they carrying them out. And it's just terrible, y'all. You should see some of the shootings and things that I have to go to. So that's my desire to see this city. We don't need the police. I mean, we need them at a certain point, but my hope is to see us police our own neighborhoods to make things better. So that's basically what I do. It's been a lot going on, so I get a little sad about some things, but I try to use OBS model. Jamal and them have a good model, the mission, to work within our own neighborhoods, and to build up our own community. So that's what we try to do. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lisa. That penetrating presentation, because ultimately it does and will really depend on people in their own communities to deal with those internal contradictions. And we know it must be very difficult having to do this kind of work and trying to build and expand those kinds of models of independence. Next, we're going to continue. And next, we're going to bring on Louise Odom, who leads the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Defense Committee. She will explain that the colonial mode of production forms a violent, parasitic relationship between Europeans versus African people and other oppressed masses. And we know that this is all related to, in terms of the Defense Committee, the targeting of the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman O'Malley specifically, along with others in the Uhuru movement that we'll talk about some more this evening. Louise, you have the floor.
Thank you, Carmetta Jamu, and I just want to appreciate the St. Louis Green Party and all the co-sponsors for the opportunity to speak today. And I do want to say, again, my name is Mwezi Odom, and I'm a member of the African People's Socialist Party, but here representing the Defense Committee. the defense campaign called the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Defense Campaign. And as you had said, Brother Ajamu, what I hope to talk about, well, what I will, briefly touch on is because, we have to look at this as not just this separate thing as gun violence, but to understand that there is this process, there's this mode of production process that humans, and in particular in this, context, as we're talking about the relationship, this parasitic relationship between, African people and European people, which we understand as a reflection of the social system that we live in, which is colonialism, enforced through this colonial mode of production. And before I go any further, I do want to, take a moment to salute the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, Chairman Amalia Shatella, who has given us this theory of African internationalism, which is a theory of practice that is really, fighting for the struggle, the liberation and unification of African people who, under the leadership of the vanguard of the African working class, the true working class. So I just really want to say that before I continue. But to, understand this parasitic relationship, which was formed by violence, right, by colonial violence, and has continued to, construct and is enforced by violence. And, we can understand that this violence that comes through the, comes down through the hands of the state, whether it be the police, the army, the Navy, violence that comes in suit and tie or a nice pantsuit as they kidnap, African babies and children from their families, gentrification, which is literally death, communities and people being, being pushed out, having nothing, constant repression, this colonial mode of production, and the theory of African internationalism informs us of this dialectic, right, between the colonizer and the colonized, and this parasitic relationship that was formed through the process of colonialism, which even created this idea of, Europeans, right? So, again, at this time, this geographical area, which we now call, Europe, under a social system of feudalism, which was informed by, even like participants within the Catholic Church. And, so we can look at this in so many ways, but, through, at a time when, people were, dying from the plague and, seriously impoverished, populations about to disappear. And Europe, this creation saved itself through its assault on Africa. Looking at the first attack, we can look back to in the 1415 with, when the Portuguese first attacked West Africa, and this process of capturing and enslaving Africans created this wealth and this resource, which birthed capitalism. And, these, and then, but how does this happen? How do Africans don't just willfully work, work for nothing? And, so we have to understand that through violence on African people, while at the same time is creating death, is now creating opportunity, right? For others, right? Who are now maybe, instead of being tied to the land and, like serfs and peasants, right, being tied to the land and having no rights at all. And even in themselves dealing with incessant violence, now are working in factories making fabric. Where is this cotton coming from, right? In a factory making rum, where is this sugar coming from, right? This is all coming through this colonial mode of production that has now produced life for some and death for others. And this is the formation of this relationship that we're talking about, which was held at the point of the gun. And it's important to understand that, because I'm asked to speak particularly on this piece, it is important because it does relate to, to this process, right, that it has to sustain itself. So there needs to be ideas, and this superstructure, right, that is now built to help sustain it has ideas and other entities of the state, the courts, I mentioned before the police and the military and, this legal system, right? This quote unquote legal system through incessant violence, which endures through centuries, comes over onto this land, slaughters the indigenous people, brings Africans over to work. And again, through violence in the form of all the states that I just mentioned, right, creates total repression for, for colonized and oppressed peoples on this land. And in particular, as we're talking about the relationship between, African and, European people. And so we can't look at violence as this separate thing. We want to take colonialism as these separate acts. But again, as I said, it comes in many different ways. And even our ideas, right? The way we, like what we believe and how we see the world can be dangerous. And like I said, it can come in a suit and a tie, or it can come like it came on July 29th, when the African People's Socialist Party and 7 of its homes and offices were violently attacked by the FBI in St. Louis, Missouri, and in St. Petersburg, Florida, with these pre-dawn raids. Those who don't know, you will see a video later on, but it's important to know that our leadership was held at gunpoint with assault rifles, laser sights on the chairman's chest, essentially an assassination attempt, at his home, almost hitting Deputy Chair, another leader of our movement, in the head with the drone, holding other leaders at gunpoint, forcing them out of their homes, at gunpoint for hours, stealing property, again, using drones, battering rams, breaking down doors and windows and stealing property. And this is not the same raid that happened at, at the Mar-a-Lago, right? So we have to look at understanding that even we are in a point that we have to understand that the real basis of this attack, right, was because we have an organization that is over 50 years, has been struggling for the liberation of African people everywhere. This anti-global, anti-colonial, organization that, and this is happening at a time when, this party that grew out at a time when the Black Panther Party, which also came under attack, we have been fighting against colonial violence, against violence for centuries. And even just within the last 100 years, we can look at the FBI's attack on the Black liberation struggle, looking at the Black Panther, looking at the Black Panther Party and other African, Black people of influence. So making these false, there's these false ideas that saying that we as African people, were told by the Russians to, to fight for reparations and to fight for gentrification, and, understanding that these are, revolutionary demands that the people, have a right to demand for and a right to struggle for. And so, and understanding
This is
how much.
3 minutes, 3 more
Thank
minutes.
you so much. Thank you. And to understand that this, in the process, the African People's Socialist Party has created a way to transform the relationship between African people and Europeans or white people, providing an opportunity for us to repair this parasitic relationship. And this is what is a threat, right? Because we are not looking to reform, we are not looking to change things. The African People's Socialist Party is looking to transform, transform the world. And even just what we've heard on this call, transforming even sectors, of communities, giving the people the right to self-determination. And so we have principles of unity that are tied to this, with this Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa defense campaign that says that anybody who understands that African people have the right to advocate and organize for the unification and liberation and self-determination, which we understand is the highest form of democracy, self-determination for Africa and African people, and denounce the violent FBI raids and attacks on the Uhuru movement. These are, it's important for us to understand that we are at a time where, as the people, we have to see that any type of fighting for freedom is illegal. And the way we get dealt with when we, fight these illegal activities, which is fighting for freedom, is through violence. And so, they didn't have to only attack African people, they also attacked white people on the south side of St. Louis. And it's important to say that because we have to understand that as we repair this relationship, it goes deeper than gun violence. It is a colonial mode of production that has in every form created violence among the people. And we have to really begin to understand that. So go to handsoffuhuru.org. I think I saw that in the chat. We need to raise money because there are threats of indictments on our leaders, and we have to fight back and create a serious pushback to raise the resources that are needed for this counteroffensive. So we will invite people to come to our next mass meeting, which is happening this Saturday. I don't know if I can say all this on here, but if I can, go to handsoffuhuru.org/events. You can register. We have to raise a lot of money in order to get the support that we need to retain our lawyers so that, when these indictments do come down, because they are imminent, we want to be able to, to fight back as we should. So go to handsoffuhuru.org, and I think my time is just coming up, so I will wrap it up there. But I just wanted to appreciate everybody for this opportunity. Uhuru.
Thank you.
Uhuru, thank you so much, my sister.
Uhuru.
Appreciate those very important comments and making these connections, and so people can understand that the various forms of violence that we face in this culture, really throughout the Western world, which makes these issues around guns and gun violence, something much more complicated than people might initially understand. Now we are going to go to our last but not least speaker. Well, I think we have someone else, but we in terms of these lists of speakers, we're going to now bring on Brother Omali Yeshitela, chairperson of the African People's Socialist Party, chair of the Uhuru movement, who would share with us the attacks that the movement was subjected to, and the chairman specifically, and his wife, by the FBI of this country. So our dear leader, Brother Omali, you have the floor.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
I want, first of all, to thank you, Comrade Ajamu, for the introduction. And I want to give a special thanks to the Green Party for hosting this webinar. I think it's extremely important. And we seem to be developing something that I have not seen for more than 50 years, when the Peace and Freedom Party united with the struggle to free Huey P. Newton, who was also a victim of FBI terror along with the FBI, that had declared the Black Panther Party to be the greatest threat to the internal security of this country. I think it's really important that the Green Party is doing this. And I also want to really express my appreciation to these courageous African people, these women who are standing in the forefront of the struggle to transform our communities. These are what we characterize as advanced sectors in communities. And every society will produce what are characterized as advanced forces. These are forces who, for various reasons, will step out and try to solve the problems in society. And I'm just so impressed with that. Sister Michelle Smith, Sister Lisa Legrand, dealing with these critical issues that we are confronted with as a people. I also want to say that there's so many issues involved in the question that's being raised now, that it's not just gun violence. But I do think we should understand why there is such gun violence here in the United States. We heard someone speak to Frank Lawrence, I think it was, about the Second Amendment and what that means and why it came into being, et cetera. There are so many guns in the United States, unlike other places that you will see, because it's a settler colonial territory. That it took guns to take this land from the indigenous people here, and it took mass population of Europeans who came to this land, finding freedom at the expense of the indigenous people here to keep it. The indigenous people did not voluntarily give up their land, give up their lives, give up their culture and their resources. It was something that came by violence, and it required guns in order to maintain that. And then African people who were kidnapped, brought here at gunpoint. I hear people often talk about how the capitalist system represents this contest that occurs at what they characterize as the point of production, where they say that value is stolen from working people. But African people are not engaged primarily at the point of production. In fact, we are lucky if we can get a job in production. Our relationship starts with the point of the bayonet, guns, violence imposed on African people that are responsible for bringing us here. And in this process, what happened was not just the colonialism that people sometimes refer to as a simple policy of a particular country or particular state. Portugal did have a policy of colonialism when it struck out in 1415 and began to colonize in Africa and began to create the modern agriculture, first with sugar, and then with coffee and things like this that spread throughout what is now called the Americas, that created for the first time a world economy that didn't exist before. The world economy came about as a consequence of enslaving Black people and forcing us at gunpoint around the world. And a whole social system was born of this. And what people refer to as the capitalist system has as its foundation colonialism. Karl Marx spoke of this before, and he talked about he defined it as primitive accumulation of capital, because there must be an explanation. Where did it come from? Did Jesus, Allah, somebody just throw all the wealth in Europe and to white people? Where did it come from? Especially when you know that in 1347, 1351, half the white people on earth died of plague. Where did it come from? How did they rescue themselves? And they rescued themselves through this whole rape of the rest of the world. They were looking for the loot that came from Mansa Musa, who in 1328 had traveled all the way from Mali through Egypt, going to Mecca, taking 60,000 people with him in an entourage, and had more gold that disrupted the whole economy of Egypt and other places in that arena. And so you have a starving Europe, and this is a literal truth, so poor that in England at different times, people even were eating their cats and their dogs and their babies. This was the depth of poverty in Europe. And where the hell did Europe get so rich? And especially when you look at the plague that decimated much of Europe. And it was Portugal striking out first. And it was connecting the world, creating a whole new mode of production. And a mode of production is that process through which a society gets what it needs to live and exist. And along with that mode of production, of course, there are the ideas that sustains that mode of production, that reinforces that mode of production, born of that mode of production. That's why when you see a society based on slavery, you don't have anything teaching freedom. That's why you have a system based on colonialism. You don't have anything teaching anti-colonialism. In fact, freedom is illegal in a slave society. That's why they put Nat Turner on trial and then executed him. And that's why you have a situation of colonialism where the FBI and all these instruments of state power harass, kill, destroy organizations, lives, and what have you. We live in a situation that is parasitic by its very nature. There's nothing good about our experience with the colonial mode of production. There's nothing positive. There's nothing progressive. It kills people. It takes people. It doesn't care. They create the conditions of starvation, poverty that drive people into what they might characterize as crime and whatever, although it's they who decide what crime is. They have defined crime as anything that really challenges the monopoly of power, the monopoly of wealth that's in the hands of a colonizer. So everybody in my community is a criminal almost, because we have to find a way to live. People can't live within the legal capitalist system, so they have to come up with illegal means. And then the federal government has facilitated that. The federal government put cocaine in our community as a means by which they could make this and deepen this assault on the African community. So the point is that if you look at this mode of production, you recognize that India, for example, the British killed maybe 1 billion people in India during colonialism. In Indonesia, in 1966, 3 million people were killed to maintain the colonial status of India with the help of the CIA. You look at 1954, 55, you see the government of Iran overthrown by the CIA, and with the help of a grandson of Roosevelt, Kermit Roosevelt, who was then with the CIA. 1954, they overthrew the government Guatemala, Arbenz there. 1959, the people of Cuba and other people began to win their freedom, but the United States has been fighting since then. So I want to say this, that we live in a world that is characterized, that's defined essentially, it's a parasitic relationship between the colonized, that's us, and that's the majority of people in the world who try to survive on $2.50 a day, the majority of people in the world trying to survive, trying to live and what have you, living under this domination. And so that's why there's perennial, ongoing, relentless war. It's not a mistake. They have to make war to maintain control of the impoverished peoples of the world because their wealth and richness depends on it. That's why there's a Del Mar divide here in St. Louis. It's not just some rich people on one side, some poor people on the other side. It's some rich people on one side because they live off the poor people on the other side. This is the parasitic relationship that we're talking about. This is a colonial mode of production that promotes, creates violence, and it also creates institutions of colonial power, the prisons, the jails, the court system, all of that facilitates the colonial domination of oppressed people. And this is a call for everybody to unite in the struggle to overturn this colonial relationship. And I think it's really important for us to be able to say that. And this takes us beyond this concept of race and fighting against this irrational, illogical, non-scientific concept of race. We're not fighting race. We're not fighting to make white people like us. We are fighting because we have to have power over our own lives and possession of our own resources in order to live. So this is where we're going for. I'm calling on everybody here to support the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign. And I'm also saying, comrades, your sisters, magnificent participants here in St. Louis, that we got building for a St. Louis Black Community Convention so Black people can come together with these issues and programs that we are talking about now, put together our own agenda for what it means to be free, deal with the kinds of issues and questions that we are talking about, and call on the Green Party and other forces like them to unite with us in putting the power in our own hands. That's where we will find where our friends are, not just people who salute us and love us in some abstract way, but who will unite with our need, our aspirations, our desire, our absolute need to have power in our own hands so that we know that our children will have a future, not because a good white person or a good Negro gets elected, because that future is in our own hands. That's why there has to be Black community control of the police. That's where the sister's going. When she talked, we solve our own problems. Black community control of the police in our communities. We know what the problems are. And the police needs not to be this force that comes in from the outside looking for trouble. The police needs to be a force from the inside trying to solve the problems. And those problems are not just people who break the law. Those problems are gentrification. Those problems are starvation, hunger, and all the other kinds of things that affect us. So thank you so much, Don, Green Party, and all of you magnificent people who are participating in this discussion. Uhuru.
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 Chairman O'Malley, thank you so much for those powerful words and insights. As we are getting ready, we want people to begin to formulate their questions. Before we go to that, though, we're going to ask that Jesse Neville from the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, I understand, is going to share with us a very short video and describe what that video is, what it contains. So Jesse, are you there? Is things set up for this? There we go.
This is the FBI. You have a federal warrant for this address. Keep your hands up and follow orders. This is the FBI. We have a warrant for...
They handcuffed me and my wife out here. They wanted me to sit on the curb while they were carrying this out, something that I refused to do. They wanted my wife to sit on the curb out here, that she refused to do.
As I was coming out, this big old drone met me.
The only revolutionary organization that's done something here on the ground practically for African people is the one that's come under attack. Institution that offers a community radio station, a newspaper, a commercial kitchen, an Aquaba Hall rental space, and community office for our organizers. That was the building that has come under attack.
You need a breach? What do you need? Need one. I don't know. Let's hold that money. Don't take it.
We will build a movement of white people that says hands off the Uhuru movement.
They see in the African People's Socialist Party a vanguard for the struggle for the liberation of our people. They see that because not just what we do here in the United States, but because we had the temerity to do like Garvey, to do like Malcolm X, and take the struggle of black people around the world.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jesse. That of course that video was self-explanatory. So we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Jesse. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ajamu Baraka, and thank you to Don Fitz and the Green Party. And I will just take 1 minute to say a couple things. And first of all, I just want to say that my name is Jesse Neville. I'm a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and the Hands Off Uhuru Defense Campaign. And I want to salute Chairman Amalia Shatella and Chair Mwezi Odom and all of the speakers tonight from this powerful event. And the statement that I wanted to make very briefly is a call for people who are tuning in tonight, who are watching, who are participating, to donate to the Hands Off Uhuru Legal Defense Fund. And that $277,500 at bare minimum is needed for legal fees to retain legal representation for Chairman Amalia Shatella and the other so-called unindicted co-conspirators who we have strong indications that within the next 2 months, possibly within the next day, possibly tomorrow morning, the chairman and the other unindicted co-conspirators will face indictments, arrests, and will be put on trial for fighting for the liberation of African and oppressed peoples. And I cannot stress enough that the need to fund this legal defense is urgent, that we raise this money to fund a legal and political fight back that will result in a victory for the people that will light up the revolutionary spirit of the whole world. You can go to handsoffahuru.org/donate and contribute. So far, generous donors from around the country have supported this, and over $150,000 have been raised, but another $126,000 is needed to secure legal representation for the chairman and the Uhuru movement to be able to wage this fight. So if you are insulted by this racist, bogus notion that Black liberation is a Russian plot, you should go to handsoffahuru.org/donate. Donate to this legal defense as a stand against all repression, as a stand for the right of African people to freedom of speech, political assembly, and expression in pursuit of their freedom. And because we can win this, we can beat them, and we can make this go down in history, not because they lock up another African revolutionary leader, but because this time the government is stopped dead in their tracks by the people rising up and saying, no, we're not going to sit by and watch them add Chairman Omali Yeshatella's name to the long list of political prisoners, already so long, with names like Mumia Abu Jamal, Leonard Peltier, Rochelle Sinkay, Alameen Jamil Abdullah, Ed Poindexter, and so many others. We're saying no, hands off Chairman Amalia Shatella and hands off the Uhuru movement. So if you go to handsoffahuru.org/donate, you are contributing to the fiscal sponsor for this campaign, the Open Collective Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. Your donations are tax deductible. And just to close this out by saying that if you are able to contribute $126,000 or $50,000 or any amount, and you want to do it anonymously or by check or some other way, contact us at info@handsoffahuru.org, and we can work with you to make this happen. So again, I cannot overstate the urgency of this. Let's make this happen. Let's bring the US government a humiliating defeat and victory to the struggle of African people for their liberation and all oppressed peoples around the world. handsoffuhuru.org/donate. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you, Jesse. See, that's how you raise money. And so I hope that people take this to heart and come up with the resources that are necessary for this. So we'll go right into the Q&As now. And our timekeeper will continue to be on the job. We are asking folks, formulate your questions, please. No more than 2 minutes max, if you need that much. I don't see a Q&A function, so I'm assuming that we'll do this all by raising your hand. You have the reaction button. You can raise your hand there. Is that how we're going to do it this evening, folks? And who's going to help to monitor these hands being raised? I'm not going to be able to see all of these. Who's working with me on this?
John, there's several co-sponsors who wanted to make a comment, and starting off with attack the system, and after that, Black is Back, and then there's another 8 or 10.
Okay, so I don't have that list. So let's then, if you have those lists of people, then let's go ahead and start going through that then.
Okay, attack the system first.
Yes, and then let me just say this before we, and so that's why it's gonna be very important for this 2-minute piece, because then we're looking at some significant time here. So Don, go ahead and you introduce the next one. First one's attack the piece.
Okay, attack the system, and that's Keith Preston.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Keith Preston. I represent a tendency called Attack the System. One thing that I'm concerned about is that in the very first presentation by Mr. Lawrence, there was a discussion of the need for stricter gun enforcement laws, but I'm concerned about how that would go about in practice, because we know that whenever there's a call for stricter law enforcement of any kind, it doesn't matter what kind of law it is, but if it's a stricter law enforcement, typically what happens is that gets turned around and it's used as an instrument of repression in communities of color and poor communities and marginal communities and disadvantaged communities of any type. And we see that, for example, with the crackdowns on crime that happened in the 80s and 90s, and we saw the use of mandatory minimums and 3 strikes and all of the things that came out of that. We all know about these things. And I'm concerned that tighter gun laws would simply be used as another instrument of repression of this type. So how would that be avoided, and if we were to, in fact, enact stricter gun legislation? I'm welcome, any comments from anyone who wants to answer that.
I can put an article in the link that would explain what the 50 types of gun legislation are that have proven to be effective, and to all communities, really, to all of our subgroups in the United States, whether you're rural or urban or racial minority, or whether you have religious issues. I mean, there's certain rules that we could apply to everybody that would make our country safer. And one of the positive things that's going on is that there is a gradual trend. I mean, I'm a hunter, but I don't expect my following generations following me to be hunters, and that the amount of interest in guns is actually on a slow decline in our country. It doesn't help that we're so saturated with guns now, but that again is a political problem. Those are all choices that we made. They have the laws that could be implemented and enforced. And I can give you a link to an article that talks about the 50 or so foundational things that people can do that would improve our society in terms of gun safety.
Thanks, Frank. Why don't you put that in the chat if you can, and just to kind of clarify how we're gonna handle or work with the co-sponsors. We're gonna go down about 5 speakers, and then we're gonna answer questions or take responses at that time.
Yeah, I put a link in the chat for you. And if you read that, you'll see that there's plenty of things that we can be doing. And most of them are very common sense. People would not really disagree with the idea that if you're a domestic abuser, that you would lose the ability to buy guns and your guns are confiscated and taken away from you. I mean, to me, that's a very common sense thing to do.
Thank you, Frank. I think
Thank you,
our
Frank.
next commenter is Lisa Davis with Black is Back.
Uhuru, and I want to thank everyone for having this forum. And I share Chairman Omali Yeshitela's, I echo his sentiment about the Green Party and the way they've been stepping up. I do know that the Green Party has participated in every demonstration we've had in front of the federal building in Newark when it came to condemning these vicious, scurrilous attacks on the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement. I want to ask a brief question. I was wondering if people had heard about what is going on with Cop City in Atlanta, Georgia, in which, my cat's in the background, please ignore the cat, in which an activist was shot and killed, but they're trying to build an 85-acre site to train police and to do all of these kind of things that they want to do. This is in Atlanta, Georgia. And I can't help but think about some of the similarities with St. Louis, because I know they got like a great big spy thing going on, they allocated lots of land and all of that to build up this center dedicated to spying on people and all of that by the state. And also I know that when I was looking at those scurrilous indictments, and my cat's acting up. When I was looking at those scurrilous indictments, I saw that one of the places that they were also targeting was an organization in Atlanta, although I don't know the name of that organization offhand. So I was just wondering if anybody knew about that and had any comments on that.
Thank you, Lisa. Who do we have next?
Matsunella Odom.
Matsunella Odom. Black community control of the police.
Uhuru Matsunella is going to use this computer here, so let me just get him in place.
All right, Uhuru, I would like to thank the Green Party for this forum here. I want to salute all the leaders, salute everyone, especially in support of the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign. I'd like to salute raising the question beyond the general conversation of what people have come to understand as gun violence to a much more colonial question. I think that also raised the importance of Black community control of the police as a democratic demand for African people to control the security of our own communities, and to where it's no longer a system that's imposed upon us. And I think that even points us towards the real gun problem, which is of the colonial, the colonizer and the weapons used to maintain the control. Chairman Omali Yeshitela has noted that when we talk about the colonial mode of production, right, that it is African people. African people are controlled and colonized at the point of the bayonet, right? So in many ways, I would just like to raise that specter there, and also Black people's courts, underscoring that for the violence that does happen within our communities, we need to be empowered to fight for even the solution towards any of the horizontal violence that might happen in our community, and that the horizontal violence is the outgrowth of the colonial violence that is imposed upon us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next, we're going to hear from M. Ward with the Albuquerque Greens.
Greetings from the land of the Tewa. In August of 2021, the United States of Mexico sued U.S. gun manufacturers for negligent marketing. The Mexican government wants to hold gun producers and distributors responsible for distributing military-grade guns to businesses that sell to traffickers. It's estimated that 70% of firearms recovered and traced from crime scenes in Mexico originated in the USA. There's evidence to support a loop of guns go to Mexico, drugs go to the United States, and violence occurs at both ends. The gun companies sought to dismiss this suit under the Protection of Lawful Commerce of Arms Act passed in 2005 to shield them from liability. Attorneys general from Massachusetts, California, Connecticut, Delaware, the District of Columbia, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, and Oregon filed an amicus curiae brief in support of Mexico, citing the paramount interest in preserving lawful tools to deter gun violence within their state, and contending that federal statutes may not be read to displace traditional areas of state authority. Unfortunately, the court granted the motion to dismiss in September of 2022. An appeal is expected. So if you reside in one of the amicus states or DC, please contact your attorney general and encourage him or her to break the loop of guns, drugs, violence, and submit an amicus curiae brief on behalf of the Mexican government for the appeal. Gracias.
Thank you. Now we're going to hear from Manny Petado with Green Party Latinx Caucus. Right?
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Manny Pintado, co-chair from the Latinx Caucus, and also a member of the Western Mass region Green Party chapter. First of all, I want to say thank you, Jamu, for being a great moderator on this amazing talk of sisters Lisa, Moisey, Elise, Brother O'Malley, with the chapter in Frank Lawrence. I'm going to be brief of something that I think wasn't touched at all, but it needs to be said. So first, I want to talk about a parasite by the name of Carl Rittenhouse. He got away with murder, 3 killings, and he got away with murder. This sends a message to young white people that you can kill and you get away with it. The reason why is we need to make changes on the court. We need to talk to people when they're gonna go as a jury, make sure that they don't accept people that have guns or that they think that they're okay with using guns. I think that's one thing that needs to be really discussed. Or anybody who thinks that a white boy can kill 3 people and get away with it. But I'm pretty sure there was somebody there that convinced everybody. So Carl Rittenhouse can be.
Manny, you have about 30 more seconds.
Okay, second, we need to do something about the illegal gun sale, okay? After what happened in Uvalde, 2 weeks later, there was an illegal gun sale just 2 blocks away from Governor DeSantis' mansion. We need to do something about that. Because if they do the DEA for drugs, we need to do something that we can stop this illegal drug, those illegal weapons that have been sold. Because everybody wants AR-15 to be, but you cannot stop them from the black market. So that's one thing that needs to be done.
Okay, your time is up, but thank you. Now we're going to take a moment for any of the original 5 speakers that would like to respond to any of the comments from our last people that made comments. So I don't know how to do this.
Just the speakers.
Speakers in their order.
Yeah,
Okay,
3 minutes.
2 minutes each.
Well, can I suggest that the speakers who want to respond, speak? We don't have to require everybody to speak. If they heard something they wanted to speak to.
Okay.
I want to just express my appreciation to what everybody's brought to this meeting, this discussion. I do want to comment on this question that somebody, I think it was Fight the System, raised about how once we arm the state to create more restrictions on the rights of the people, the greater the potential for serious problems is. And I think that what we recognize is that the colonial state demands a monopoly on violence. This is one of the things that defines this relationship. The state demands a monopoly on violence, a monopoly on electric chairs, or whatever means of execution, monopoly on the violence of people killing us in our communities and things like that. And that's reflected on almost everything that they do. And so I think that's really important. And I also think that we should remember what happened in 2014, the uprising in Ferguson, that the white people bought all the damn guns in St. Louis. You couldn't find a gun in St. Louis because the colonizers, the white people, bought the guns. A direct, obvious relationship between colonialism and guns and violence. And that happened for real. I think also that that it should be understood that what happened to the African People's Socialist Party on July 29th is consistent with the history. They charged W.E.B. Du Bois with the very same thing they charged me with. Somehow I'm supposed to be a Russian agent because I'm fighting for Black people. It's a racist trope that Black people are supposed to be so stupid that we don't know we are oppressed unless somebody who they consider white comes and tell us that we are oppressed. And that everybody should be offended by that. I am. I'm mad as hell. And I think that
30 more seconds.
on the 30 seconds, I just want to say that part of the reason they attacked us is because they demand a monopoly on resources and to keep African people living in a state of dependency. And that African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement have created dual and contending power institutions. We bought properties on Natural Bridge, the old boathouse there, where we're turning into a bakery for the community. We're turning it into a workforce program where Africans who are getting out of prisons can learn how to the culinary skills. And then we bought houses to put them in so that they'd have a place to live, whether there we created basketball courts. We created a farmer's market. We've transforming an entire African community, and that's not permissible. And so the thing is that moving our people away from dependency, which is colonialism, is the crime that we are really guilty of. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers that would like to respond to any of the questions or comments that have been brought up?
Barb, check your chat, please.
Check my chat. Okay.
This is for speakers.
Okay. All right. Joe, am I missing a speaker that?
I have Barbara Dahlgren from Wisconsin Greens, I think, who's going to make a statement as well.
Yeah, she's.
Yeah, she's.
Are we moving back to statements?
Yes. So
Okay,
we're
great.
moving back to statements, and the next is Tracy Carson from Indiana.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. Thank you for the invite. There's a lot going on, and I want to thank Pluto, especially for getting me on this important discussion. Just a quick note I put in there about a forum that I am hosting on February the 17th and I'm in need of particularly an African-American speaker. Is talking about our exit from duopoly. I think we can all agree that money in politics is the main issue in terms of getting things the way that they should be. So my email is tracymediallc@gmail.com, and I would appreciate any help I can get. Thank you.
Where's Tracy located?
Oh, I'm in Indiana.
Thank you, Tracy. I think Don Fitz is next.
Okay, great. I want to remind everybody that in 1800, the first successful slave revolt in this hemisphere took place in Haiti. And the US responded by saying that Haiti, which was once the jewel of the Western Hemisphere, would be left destitute and impoverished, which has occurred through today. The next great successful revolution in this hemisphere was the slave descendant population of Cuba in 1959, threw off the yoke of imperialism, and the United States immediately began starting economic sanctions to destroy that people. During the early 1960s, Black Cubans visited a doctor for the first time and saw clinics being built in their neighborhood for the very first time. At the time this was happening, Blacks could watch on TV that Black people in America were being beaten and clubbed for the crime of wanting to sit at lunch counters. I wrote a book in 2020 about the Cuban healthcare system, and I pointed out that Cuba developed a health system which results in a longer life expectancy and lower infant mortality than the US at a cost of less than 10% per person of what the US does. When the African People's Socialist Party was developing their Black Power blueprint, one of the things that they did was to use the insights from the Cuban medical system to want to create a women's health center, which, like in Cuba, would focus on preventive medicine for women and infants. The US press and agencies such as the FBI do not want Black Americans to know that utilizing Cuban approaches could dramatically improve health in Black communities. So while we usually think of violence as people picking up guns and shooting somebody or storming into their homes, the FBI attacks on the APSP and the Uhuru is a violent attack on Black, brown, Native, and poor white communities, and especially the health care of Black women and infants.
All right, Don, thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Barbara Dahlgreen from the Green Party of Wisconsin.
Hi, friends. Thanks for having me. This has been so fantastic. I've learned so much from all of you. I just wanted to make a couple notes about our little situation up in the northlands of Wisconsin, that I'm just feeling the solidarity of all the other cities, all the other people in the cities around here about what's going on with you guys. It's really the same thing everywhere. A really smart activist told me that a long time ago. What do you mean that it's, what's your particular situation? It's really the same thing everywhere. About half of our city budget in Milwaukee is the police force. Half of the city budget in my suburb is the police force. And guess who's solving the crimes? Not the police force. Actually, there's advocates like Tory Lowe, who's a radio host, that people call him up to solve their crimes because the police won't do it. In fact, the police are committing the crimes. We have people like Irie Payne, who was a homeless man sleeping in the university, and he was shot. Luckily he survived, but now he's in prison for just being there. We have Tari Davis, who was just sitting on his porch and caught a stray bullet from a police officer who was pursuing somebody else. And then they started acting as if he was a suspect for no reason because they didn't want to ever apologize or pay for any of his medical bills or anything. And he's finally getting a settlement from the city, but that's not an apology. That's nothing, you know. That was his life.
Barbara,
So,
you have 30 seconds.
So I just want to say that we're working on these issues. People don't have violence issues when they're not being patrolled by these ridiculous regimes that we have above us. And we want to invite everybody into the Green Party to actually pull up that power ourselves, because we don't need a fascist system to tell us what to do. So thank you so much. And that's about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. Next, we have from the Pacific Green Party of Oregon, Natalie Parvasini.
Ubuntu and Uhuru. And I just want to thank you very much. I learned so much from the African American community when I used to work in Houston in the 5th Ward on death row on social justice and incarceration issues. And I just want to thank very much for the education I received from there. I want to also acknowledge Indigenous communities and the earth who are just as exploited. And the whole economic system is so crazy that we're all headed towards extinction with climate change. I don't think people realize that we're going to have food shortages and other issues. We don't have enough antibiotics. I'm a doctor and I run into shortages of antibiotics now. I want to also, so I wanted to put that out. I wanted to also mention that my understanding is that you need more than a half of the states to abolish the death penalty to bring it to the federal level. We already have 20 states who have abolished the death penalty, but 4 states have a moratorium, including Oregon, and that's something that hopefully we'll get to work on one of these days soon to bring that to a majority of the states in the United States. Lastly, I just want to put out the issue of the military and war. Are more than pretty much close to half of our taxes, our discretionary spending, go to the military, to the Pentagon. Yet for 5 years in a row, the Pentagon has failed its audits, and they cannot account for close to half or more than half their budget, which if that were the case for the education department or the Department of Social Services for 1 year, you would have like a cut of funds of the department. But when it's the Pentagon, nobody talks about it. And I'm so incensed about it. It's just incredible. I want to mention also that this debt ceiling, the fight over the debts, the debt ceiling is a perfect opportunity to highlight the fact that the debt ceiling could be addressed by actually taxing the rich, lifting the Social Security cap, and really addressing the loss of monies from the Pentagon. I just want to say a few words. I'm here. Please feel free to give me a call if I can be of any resource. I'm definitely going to reach out. I am so incensed about the whole Uhuru raid. It's just ridiculous. It's not acceptable. It's unbelievable that this is happening in the United States. So many things. And thank you very much for organizing this.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear from Zaki Barudi with Universal African Peoples Organization, and then we'll hear some responses from our original.
Uhuru, I just want to say a sincere thank you to the panelists. There's some powerful statements moving forward for everybody that's on this webinar. We have to intensify our struggle to dismantle the blood-sucking capitalistic system that does what it does each and every day. I want to also remind people that Dr. King back in 1967 said that the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today is his own government, as well as I would encourage Brother Juma Baraka to be our presidential candidate for 2024 to on the political side to highlight all of the contradictions here in this society. And hands off Uhuru, hands off Brother Omali Yesateli and the African People's Socialist Party.
Thank you, Zaki. Jamu, shall I send this back to you to take?
He had to leave, Barb.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
He had to leave, so you'll have to take over.
Oh, wow, he didn't.
I'm sorry.
He didn't hear my recommendation for him being.
He dropped off right when you started. Sorry.
I think I see him.
I'm sorry, I'm totally lost. See whom? I couldn't hear what people. were saying.
Jamu, I see him.
Oh, is he there?
I think so. I see his, yeah. Going, fading out between Comrade Zaki and Jamu.
Well, Ajama, can you hear us or speak?
He messaged me about 2 minutes ago and said he had to drop off.
Oh, he did drop off.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess we'll open it up to questions or comments to the presenters. Yes, Don? Or
Sure.
and I'm going to go ahead and keep timing people for 2 minutes. So the best way, maybe I'll check the screens and see if people have their hands raised.
Check your chat too.
And I'll check the chat too, if you want to speak. Anybody else, let me know if you see anybody that I miss. And then I think what we should do after this, I'm still looking. Hands raised for questions. Here's 2 in the chat. Oh yeah, Jason Youngbloth had wanted to speak earlier. So let's hear from Jason and then Jamal.
Thank you very much. I'm with the Green Party of Monroe County, New York, here representing New York State in an unofficial capacity. Since May, we've been in New York. We've been very engaged with the gun control issue. That's what brings me to this webinar today. We recently issued a statement condemning the massacres that took place in the Tops Market in Buffalo, New York, and then in the Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, in the same month. It's a pretty forceful statement. I was the author of it, and I raised that just because I would like to introduce the topic for Greens, or for anyone here, but for Greens going forward, to consider the possibility that the principal issue, which has been obliquely touched on by some of the speakers tonight, is the capitalist system as it relates to the production of guns. Put bluntly, if you're going to keep dumping an endless supply of guns out of the public, it's only natural that they're going to have to be sold to lunatics as well as to otherwise responsible gun owners. And I think that's what we're seeing happen. It's responsible for much of the crime that we're seeing, especially these horrifying mass shootings that seem to come without end. So I'm trying to encourage the Green Party of New York to pursue an extremely aggressive agenda of shutting down gun stores that are connected with mass shooters, beginning with the one gun store in Endicott, New York, that armed Peyton Gendron, the top shooter. This is oh, I'm sorry.
30 more seconds.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So anyway, anyone who's interested in this agenda might want to reach out to the Green Party of New York State, or you can put your name in the chat and I'll be more than happy to send you my email address. But I think the time has come for a lot more vigorous action against the actual commerce end of the mass shooting epidemic.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. I think Jamal wanted to speak. Abaquez. Jamal.
Oh, yes. And thank you, Uhuru, and thank you to all the panelists. This is a question for everyone. Touched on a little bit earlier, but I think it bears a little more focused. Making a historical materialist analysis demonstrates that the real utility of the Second Amendment isn't, hunting, but really that it allowed groups of colonizers the legal protection to massacre the indigenous nations of this continent and what came to be the US, right? Before the US Army built forts, right? Marauding bands of colonizers or militia used the Second Amendment to create the settler colony. Yet often and in many ways denied gun ownership to Africans in the US. Understanding that history and that the law is the opinion of the class, and that all gun laws disproportionately drive Africans into these colonial prisons, can we trust that the US can make any gun laws that won't be a ploy to lock up more African people? And are we obligated to support building a new world and support organizations that are building a better anti-colonial world? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lisa Davis. Lisa, did you want to speak?
Yes, I just have a question. I want to ask Sister Lisa a little bit more about when she was saying that she models a lot of her work on the Organization for Black Struggle. I just wanted to ask her a little bit more about that.
Okay, Miss Lisa, what it is with OBS, we do a lot in our own communities. Gardening, it's just a lot of things. And when we came up with Project Haki, we saw that the police really didn't. Let me tell you something about the 22nd Ward. They destroyed the 22nd Ward. 22nd Ward was a ward that was thriving with working people that had good jobs with Black working families. They took that community and they closed all the schools. They just took everything and they destroyed it. And so OBS been over there for a long time in that ward trying to bring knowledge and stuff. I'm not a good speaker, y'all, but bringing
resources
and African ways, going back to our own cultures, all that. They, Jamal and them and Kalimu have been doing a good job. They've been doing a good job about that. Jamala always tell me, Lisa, we could police our own. We don't need the police because the police make things worse. And so that's what I mean when I say, even about sitting on the juror, Jamal and them push the Black Jurors Matters. We always trying to not, and I'm not gonna say every Black person, but I'm one of the ones that used to be like this, that didn't want to sit on the jury because I didn't think that it meant that me being on there meant anything. But now I really understand, and that's why I really appreciate Michelle Smith's work with the execution. And so, that's what I mean. I'm not a good speaker, y'all, so I just,
I think you're a wonderful speaker. I appreciate your energy and all you're doing for your community. Thank you.
Okay. And so I hope I answered Lisa's question. Lisa, did I answer it well enough for you?
Oh, yes, and thank you so much. I'm looking forward to learning more about your work and your organization.
Okay.
Lisa, OBS is a longtime organization here in St. Louis working in the interests of African people. Organization Black Struggle. It's been here for a very long time. And I feel like at one time, OBS and Zaki Barudi's Universal African Peoples Organization, like, were the two outstanding African organizations in this city.
And still are.
Great, fantastic. Well, the Black is Back Coalition, we're a coalition of organizations. Looking forward to working with you more.
I'm looking to see if there's any more hands up or people that would like to speak. Unless I'm missing something, there aren't. Do we want to hear?
Well, do we want to hear a final 2-minute statement from each one of the panelists?
I have another question if nobody else is going to ask a question, and if there's time.
I'm sorry, Lisa, what did you
No, I was just saying, if there's still time and nobody else has any more questions, I have another one that I wanted to ask.
Oh, okay.
Right. Thank you again so much. This is directed toward the people of St. Louis and specifically Chairman Omali Yeshitela. But I wanted to hear a little bit more about that spy center that that they built up in St. Louis and the connection to how you were attacked. And like I said, when I was reading about Pop City, which I'm learning more about in Atlanta, but they're building a great big huge center, 85 acres, you know, a police center. And from what I understand, they attacked the protesters who were protesting to protect, they wanted it to be turned into a park, were protesting to protect that land. From what I understand, it was like a military force that went after them. And again, oh my God, in that indictment, I know that there's also a reference to some organization or something in Atlanta. So I was just wanted to hear your thoughts about that.
I wanted to say that this NGA, this National Geospatial Agency, this was going to be NGA West. There's one also NGA East. This is going to be the biggie. And it has a history, goes back of a couple of hundred years with Lewis and Clark, who you know, did this exploration throughout this area to like on a military exploration, although it's never talked about in that fashion, but that's what Lewis and Clark was, like spy exploration about this land. And what it did was, and what it has done is taken up to 1,000 acres when you combine the actual campus and the parts of the neighborhood that surrounds it, because it's going to have to be sanitized in terms of security, sanitation, 1,000 acres of land from the most oppressed sector, the whole St. Louis and North St. Louis. It forced people to give up their land for, you know, through eminent domain. And people didn't want to give up that. I mean, we were involved in some of the struggle to try to prevent that from happening. But the NGA, the thing that it will end up doing, it will contribute to greater blight. It will push people out of their homes in the first place, and then it will change the neighborhood in such a fashion that the tax rate of the properties all around will go up, and it will push more people to lose their homes for tax payments. And St. Louis has the first, in this country, the first so-called land bank created in 1972, ostensibly to cure blight. At the same time, 1972, they put forth a Team 4 plan that was designed to starve North St. Louis. It was called benign neglect, to make sure that the North St. Louis was starved. That's what it was about. So this land bank takes properties and has taken so much property. It's the largest landowner in St. Louis is this land bank. They call it the LRA, and Land Reutilization Authority. And it takes the properties from people that for taxes and zone inability to meet their requirements to keep up the property. You know, you have old women, husbands die, widows and stuff like that, ain't got no money. And so they up the, you know, they enforce, code enforcement thing is escalated. So all this property gets taken from Black people. It's supposed to be curing Black. They take this property, and they are literally white developers who actually purchase hundreds, or they get hundreds of these properties at a time. And we have got some of these properties, but it's complicated. And the only way we've got a few of them is because we have developed techniques over a number of 40 years or so of dealing with stuff. But ordinary folk, they're losing their homes, and they call it curing blight. That's part of the whole process they've used for gentrifying St. Louis, and to make the objective in part is to make St. Louis white, a majority white city. So that's the kind of thing that's happening here. And so you have this, that is one aspect of it. Then you have the so-called, this NGA, this geospatial agency. The geospatial agency, let me just say this, somebody talked about war. This controls like the drones, the satellites, the drones and things like that are killing people all around the world in different places. The United States controls this with this drones. So they're pushing Russia every day, China every day. I mean, pushing toward like some kind of military confrontation.
And Russia is not Afghanistan, and China is not Afghanistan. They're pushing toward a nuclear conflagration. And if a nuclear attack happens and Russia has to defend itself, where is it going to attack strategically? It's going to attack North St. Louis and the NGA, the so-called this this entity that they've created for the purpose of making war.
Your time is up, but please finish your thoughts.
No, it's really imperialism's time that's really up.
I don't think we have any more comments from the audience or the commenters. Would the speakers like to make a final comment? 2 minutes, and maybe I'll just call roll. Frank, would you like to say something in closing? 2 minutes.
Yeah, I did stick a link in the chat section from every town that discusses how you can do side-by-side comparisons between the different states and the gun safety regulations that are going on at the current time. They seem to be keeping up with it better than anyone. It's really like watching one of those ticker meters that are displaying the national debt. There's so much changing in 50 states going in different directions at all times. So much is ending up in court being litigated that it's extremely difficult to keep tracking it. And it's very discouraging to people to think that, well, there's nothing we can do about gun violence to improve our society. And that's not really true. Most of it's common sense regulations. It's just a political decision about whether we do those things or not. So anyway, thank you all. Very interesting.
Frank, thank you for your comments. Michelle Smith. Are you still on, Michelle?
I'm sorry, 1 second.
Oh, sure.
Hello, I am on, and I want to say first, my apologies. Our client will be executed next Tuesday, so I am in like rapid response mode right now. It's a lot of stuff going on, and I've been on the phone with some attorneys, so my apologies. That's why I was off of camera. We literally trying to save a man's life over here. But I definitely want to, say thank you for allowing me to be in the space, and of course with people that I greatly respect. And I did hear Lisa mention me, and of course I love Lisa to death. She is in the 22nd ward in that community. She's a staple and, very respected. And of course OBS is very thankful to have her. So, but again, my apologies for being away for a little bit. It's a lot going on over here that I'm trying to deal with, and hopefully we'll have some good outcome in this situation.
Thank you for your work. Thank you.
Thank you for having me tonight.
Let's see. Lisa LeGrone.
I wanted to thank each and every one of you for letting me be in your space. I'm on this call with a bunch of prominent people, and I did not realize that you all were all gonna be on this call. I do this work, y'all, strictly from the heart because I'm trying to save the young community. Last year, I had a grandson that was shot in the head 3 times. And I do it for him too. And so I appreciate you all sharing your space with me. And if you need me for anything, or if you need me to do some de-escalation, anything, I left my I put my email in the comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Muizi Odom.
Uhuru. I just really want to start by just saying I just really want to appreciate the space. Those who spoke before me, specifically speakers, Sister Michelle Smith and Lisa LeGrone, just really appreciate you sisters, and just want to really salute you and salute all the presenters and all the questions, and just raising the importance of having these democratic spaces where we can continue to have these discussions, but it's not just about talking. We have to continue to, unite and build the work. And just want to say that I want to make another call because with the last piece that I have left to go to handsoffuhuru.org/donate. We have, like we said, with the support of the people, we have been able to raise resources, but this can only be done, we're confident that we can push back the state, put the state on trial in all its various ways that it continues to impact our communities. We can win, but the ability of all the struggles that we are fighting rests with the participation of the people. And so I just really want to appreciate tonight's program and tell everyone to go to the website and also to look at this in terms of, we're talking about Second Amendment rights, but we're also funding for the victories for us to uphold our First Amendment rights, the rights to freedom of speech, the rights to freedom of assembly, and this is what the Hands Off Uhuru campaign represents, and we are winning. Uhuru.
Thank you. And we're going to finish off with Chairman O'Malley.
Thank you, Comrade Barbara. I just want to say that I'm calling on people to recognize that I think it's on Wednesday, Jesse Todd is taking before the board of what's it called? The committee on
the safety committee, public safety committee.
Public safety committee, Dred Scott sanctuary, refugee sanctuary city resolution that would call on the city of St. Louis to repudiate what it did with Dred Scott, to repudiate the crimes that's committed against the Black community here, and to declare that St. Louis will be a sanctuary city, and that the city would not cooperate with the FBI or any federal organization that's involved in attacking Black people who are organizations that's working from the best interests of our community, as they did on July 29th. So people, please go to Hands Off Uhuru. I think you can get more information on that. I think it would be good if we have a magnificent turnout for that hearing. I think you can get to it via Zoom, and to support this resolution that the city of St. Louis will refuse to participate with any federal agency that is about attacking any African person or organization that's working to uplift the conditions of our community. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Green Party, for hosting this, and also all of you magnificent forces who are out there working, trying to change this world and make it a place where human beings can actually live in without oppression, without exploitation. So we want to end this system of slaves and slave masters and workers and bosses, and the people need to be out. That's what this project is about, and I appreciate it so very much. Uhuru.
Thank you.
Uhuru.
You want to say something in closing?
The Green Party is having, we're trying to have almost monthly webinars. So we're not sure if we're going to have one a month from now on March the 1st, but people are working on it. And so keep tuned, because everybody who has signed up for this will receive an invitation to the rest of the webinars that we'll be having this year.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.